Greetings, my Israelite brothers and sisters, heirs, joint heirs, adopted, grafted, natural, spiritual. However you may come, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. My email, bethelhouseofgod@gmail.com. I knew that the question was going to eventually come, and it came. I saw it in comment sections, but I got several emails on it, and that is, why do I open up the way that I open up? Why do I say natural and spiritual Israel? Those that are heirs and joint heirs. Who am I talking about? Who specifically am I talking to? So let's get into this. I'm going to make this very quick, plain. I'm going to give you some history, and we're going to dive right into this. Israel, who is natural Israel, they are the people who are of the stock of Abraham. They are the descendants of the nations of Israel. The nations of Israel are 12 tribes that came from Jacob. Jacob was a descendant of Isaac. Isaac was a descendant of Abraham, and Abraham was a descendant from Shem. The promise and the covenant was given to Abraham, passed down to Israel. Israel went into Egypt. They went into bondage 400 plus odd years. Moses, who became the messenger of God, gave them an agreement after he went up to Mount Sinai. Israel agreed to enter into that covenant agreement. Moses took the blood and sprinkled both the people, the book, and Israel entered into a blood covenant with the Most High God. The issue is, in 28th chapter of Deuteronomy, they failed. Natural Israel failed. The descendants of Jacob, the 12 tribes of Israel, failed repeatedly, historically, from one generation to the next, several generations down the road. Even today, we get into that in another discussion. But Israel failed miserably. Every time God put them in captivity, he would go, wait a little bit, come up and grab the children. He would go, try to get them to keep the covenant and to restore the agreement that he had with them way back on Mount Sinai. And that was to keep the commandments, the laws, the statutes of the Most High God. And if they did, they would become high above every nation. They would be God's people. And their job, Israel's job, was to take this culture, take this lifestyle to all the nations. They were supposed to be the leaders of the earth. Everybody would want to flow unto Egypt. In fact, in Numbers, the 12th chapter, verse 49, God said if anybody wants to sojourn with Israel, the same law that's for Israel is the same law for the strangers and those that want to sojourn with him. But what did Israel do? Let's go to Jeremiah, the 11th chapter, so you can understand why do I say greetings to all of my Israelite brothers and sisters, natural and spiritual, grafted heirs and joint heirs. So, once again, the children of Israel were in bondage. This is generations down the road. God is still trying to reach Israel. So he sends Jeremiah, the prophet, in the 11th chapter, and Jeremiah comes and says this. Look at verse 1. The word that came to Jeremiah from the Lord, saying, Hear ye the words of this covenant, and speak unto the men of Judah and to the inhabitants of Jerusalem, and say unto them, Thus saith the Lord God of Israel, Cursed be the man that obeyeth not the words of this covenant, which I commanded your fathers in the day that I brought them forth out of the land of Egypt from the iron furnace, saying, Obey my voice and do them according to all which I command you, so shall ye be my people, and I will be your God, that I may perform the oath which I have sworn unto your fathers, to give them a land flowing with milk and honey, as it is this day. Then answered I and said, So be it, O Lord. Then the Lord said unto me, proclaim all these words in the cities of Judah and in the streets of Jerusalem, saying, hear ye the words of this covenant and do them. You see, the promised land flowing with milk and honey, Israel was supposed to be a nation that caused others to want to flow into it, and the land flowing with milk and honey was a similitude of the kingdom that the Messiah is going to set up right here on this earth during the 1,000-year millennium, and Jesus himself was set on the throne of David. However, listen to this. Verse 7, for I earnestly protested unto your fathers in the day that I brought them out of the land of Egypt, even unto this day, rising early and protesting, saying, obey my voice. Look at verse number 8. Yet they obeyed not, nor inclined their ear, but walked every one in the imagination of their evil heart. Therefore I will bring upon them all the words of this covenant, which I commanded them to do, but they did them not. And the Lord said unto me, a conspiracy is found among the men of Judah and among the inhabitants of Jerusalem. They are turned back to the iniquities of their fathers, which refused to hear my words. And they went after other gods to serve them. The house of Israel, the house of Judah, have broken my covenant, which I made with their fathers. And it's happening today. When you bring in Christmas and Easter, those are other gods that you are mixing in, because those things are not in the scriptures. That's a different lesson. I'll get into that. Look at verse number 11. Therefore thus saith the Lord, behold, I will bring evil upon them, which they shall not be able to escape. And though they shall cry unto me, I will not hearken unto them. Then shall the cities of Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem go and cry unto the gods unto whom they offered incense, but they shall not save them at all in the time of their trouble. For according to the number of the cities were thy gods, O Jerusalem, and according to the number of the streets of Jerusalem, have ye set up altars to that shameful thing, even altars to burn incense to Baal. Therefore pray not thou for this people, neither lift up a cry or prayer for them, for I will not hear them in the time that they cry unto me for their trouble. God has always heard Israel. This is it. Natural Israel is in trouble. The stock of Abraham is in trouble. Natural Israel has gone way too far for the Most High God. Look at verse 15. What hath my beloved to do in my house, seeing she hath wrought lewdness with many, and the holy flesh is passed from thee? When thou doest evil, then thou rejoicest. The Lord called thy name a green olive tree, fair and of goodly fruit, with the noise of a great tumult. He hath kindled fire upon it, and the branches are broken. Israel, as a green olive tree that is supposed to go upright and flourish, God has broken the branches of Israel from off of the tree because he's upset. This is the analogy that he gives to Jeremiah. Look at verse number 16 again. The Lord called thy name a green olive tree, fair and of goodly fruit, with the noise of a great tumult. He hath kindled the fire upon it, and the branches of it are broken. For the Lord of hosts that planted thee hath pronounced evil against thee. For the evil of the house of Israel and the house of Judah, which they have done against themselves, to provoke me to anger and offering incense to Baal. So let me stop there. Let's go over to Romans, the 11th chapter, because natural Israel has messed up. And what God is doing, the Most High is doing, he is now going after a spiritual Israel. Here's why. Before I read Romans, let's go to Deuteronomy, the 32nd chapter, because a warning was given to Israel. And let's see if they understand the warning that was given to them. It was prophesied by Moses that they would make God jealous. Listen to this in verse 16. They provoked me to jealousy with strange gods. With abominations provoked they him to anger. They sacrificed unto devils, not to God, to gods whom they knew not, to gods that came up, to new gods that came newly up, whom your fathers feared not. Of the rock that begat thee, thou art unmindful, and hast forgotten God that formed thee. This is what Israel did. And when the Lord saw it, it abhorred them because of the provoking of his sons and of his daughters. And he said, I will hide my face from them. I will see what their end shall be, for they are a very forward generation, children in whom is no faith. They have moved me to jealousy with that which is not God. They have provoked me to anger with their vanities, and I will move them to jealousy with those which are not a people. I will provoke them to anger with a foolish nation. So you know what God's saying? You brought in other gods. You went after other people and you made me jealous with something that is not even a God. And I'm going to provoke you to jealousy, and I'm going to make you angry, and I'm going to deal with a nation and a people who is outside of your own nation. And this is why Jeremiah said God cut Israel off. He cut them off like a branch that was connected to the olive tree. But the question is, in the Romans, the 11th chapter, Paul asked a question in verse 1. I say then, have God cast away his people? God forbid. For I also am an Israelite, of the seed of Abraham, of the tribe of Benjamin. God hath not cast away his people, which he foreknew. What ye not what the scripture saith of Elias, how he maketh intercession to God against Israel? I'm going to skip over. Look at verse number 11. I say then, have they stumbled that they should fall? Talking about Israel. God forbid. But rather, through their fall, salvation is come to the Gentiles. The Gentiles are people who are outside, and they are the other nations. You have Israel, and Gentiles is all of the other nations. They're not the stock of Abraham. They're not the natural bloodline of Abraham, but they are a group of people because of Jesus and being justified by faith. They can become what we call spiritual Israel. You have natural Israel and spiritual Israel, but everybody must become spiritual Israel. Everybody. The natural Israel has to become spiritual Israel, and the Gentiles have to become spiritual Israel. What do you mean by that? The word Israel or Yisra means to walk or stride. The word El means God. So if you are walking and striving with God, you become the Israel of God. You become the apple of his eye. So let's read this. I say then, have they stumbled that they should fall? Verse 11 of the 11th chapter of Romans. God forbid. But rather through their fall, salvation is common to the Gentiles, for to provoke them to jealousy. Now if the fall of them be the riches of the world, and the diminishing of them the riches of the Gentiles, how much more their fullness? For I speak to you Gentiles, inasmuch as I am the apostle of the Gentiles, I magnify my office. If by any means I may provoke to emulation them which are my flesh, and might save some of them. Paul is trying to wake up Israel. Israel, you better watch out, because you're not the only nation in town. You're not the only people in town. And plus, it is designed that God wants all mankind to be saved. He wants them all to receive salvation, because we all are the sons and daughters of Noah, or one of his three sons on this side of the flood. So God is simply saying, Paul says, for I speak to you Gentiles, inasmuch as I am the apostle to the Gentiles, I magnify my office. If by any means I may provoke to emulation them which are my flesh, that means natural Israel, and might save for them. Listen to this. For if the casting away of them be the reconciling of the world. In other words, if God says, listen, I'm going to cast them away so I can reconcile the entire world. And he did that when he sent his only begotten son, who became the atonement. His blood became the atonement and the justifier of our sins through faith. And he sent out the disciples, and who became the apostles, who were Israelites. He sent them to the lost sheep of the house of Israel, and he also sent them to the Gentiles. And when Israel failed, through the reconciling, through the casting away of them, it reconciled the world. Now Israel, now those of you that are not natural Israel, you must become spiritual and Israel. And those of you that are natural Israel, I got news for you. You can trace your DNA back to Abraham himself. But if you are not keeping the Torah, if you're not keeping this book, law, statute, ordinances, judgments, and so forth, dietary law, feast days, your circumcision will be counted as uncircumcision. Listen to this in verse 15. For if the casting away of them be the reconciling of the world, what shall be the receiving of them be but life from the dead? For if the first fruit be holy, the lump is also holy. And if the root be holy, so are the branches. And if some of the branches be broken off, remember in Jeremiah the 11th chapter, the branches are going to be broken off from that green olive tree. Listen to this. And if some of the branches be broken off, and thou, being a wild olive tree, talking to the Gentiles, you being a wild olive tree, were grafted in among them, and with them partakers of the root and the fatness of the olive tree. So what he allowed the Gentiles to do when he cut off Israel, who was of the green olive tree, because they are natural. They are natural. They were connected naturally. God cut them off to provoke them to jealousy, and through the casting away of them, he's bringing in the reconciling of the entire world. And you, spiritual Israel, you other Gentiles, you now have to be grafted in. How do you become grafted in? You must become a part of the root. You must keep the laws, statutes, judgments, feast days, dietary law, so that you can take. And if you don't partake, then you don't take. Then what happens is, although you were grafted in, because you are not taking, you're not adopting, you're going to be rejected. You know, just like an organ, a person donates an organ to a body. The body has to accept that foreign organ. It can be rejected. So what I'm saying is, you being a wild olive tree, you were grafted into this green olive tree. And if you don't take, you're going to be rejected. Listen to what he says. And if some of the branches be broken off, verse 17, and thou being a wild olive tree, were grafted in among them, and with them partakest of the root and the fatness of the olive tree. Verse 18, boast not against the branches. Boast not against the branches, but if thou boast, thou bearest not the root, but the root thee. You not upholding the root is upholding you. You were allowed to come in. You're not bringing in the root is allowing you to come in. So this is why I say to heirs, joint heirs, grafted, however you may come, natural and spiritual, because Gentiles as well as natural Israel must come back. Even Israel, who was cut off, you too have to be grafted. Listen to this. Thou wilt say then, the branches were broken off that I might be grafted in. Well, because of unbelief, they were broken off. And thou standest by faith. Be not high-minded, but fear. For if God spared not the natural branches, take heed lest he also spare not thee. Behold, therefore, the goodness and the severity of God on them which fell severity. On Israel it fell severity, but toward thee goodness. Listen to this. If thou continue in his goodness, otherwise Israel as well as Gentiles, you can be cut off. Otherwise thou also, speaking to the Gentiles, shall be cut off. And they also, if they abide not still unbelief, shall be grafted in. For God is able to graft in natural Israel again. For if thou were cut out of the olive tree, which is wild by nature, and were grafted contrary, if you were grafted contrary to nature into a good olive tree, how much more shall these which be the natural branches be grafted into their own olive tree? And this is why I tell Israel everywhere, natural, wake up, spiritual, come on in, because we all are the apple of God's eye. Natural Israel, it shouldn't take you but this to jump in. Gentiles, it may take you a while because you may not be used to the customs of eating clean, keeping God's laws, keeping God's dietary laws, his Sabbath, his feast days. But it is God's desire that he wants everybody to come in to be a part of the root, and that root is of the seed of David, which is the Messiah himself, who was set on the throne of David during 1,000 years of reign. I hope and pray this answered your question. Why do I say thank you, Israel, for tuning in? Whether you're heirs, joint heirs, whether you are grafted, adopted, natural, and spiritual. Thank you for tuning in. really, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Peace.